To a certain extent, the effects of the restrictive social norms that we discussed before differ depending on the scale we're talking about. At the level of society, the benefits of removing many of the social penalties that currently restrict diversity of thought include 1. That it helps solve our most difficult problems, and 2. That it can keep resentment from building and minimize the pushing of people to more extreme positions. However, there are additional reasons why, in other settings, diversity of thought is crucial. On the level of college campuses, debate and dissent are considered desirable, even necessary. It is through having ideas challenged and criticized that people learn and grow. Further, at the level of corporations and organizations, innovation is prioritized and valued. Innovation involves trying on lots of ideas, some of which succeed, and some of which land with a thud. Placing heavy social penalties on what can be voiced and who can voice it limits what employees are comfortable attempting, suggesting, asking, and criticizing. This self-censorship puts an organization at a disadvantage. It turns out that people aren't free to debate, dissent, or innovate when they feel they have to walk on eggshells. These challenges are present on campuses and in businesses all the time. Stakeholders at all levels, including leadership, administration, staff, students, and employees, have choices about how to respond and how to deal with them. And because these are spaces where people are going to continue to interact with one another, all parties need to invest in building and fostering a healthy relationship. In that context, when one person is offended by a statement made by another and the person who said it thinks they shouldn't be, finding the way forward can be a challenge. So how can the inevitably difficult social interactions be managed effectively? Imagine an interaction between two people where Sue says something that Tony finds offensive. A common response is to defer to Tony's hurt feelings. This usually means explaining to Sue why Tony found what she said offensive and asking Sue to be more considerate in the future. And in some cases, that is probably the right choice. After all, a climate where people run roughshod over the feelings of their peers and colleagues is counterproductive. However, when sensitivities run high, this deferral can have the unintended consequence of stifling the dissent, debate, and innovation that are both desired and necessary. A climate where people feel they have to avoid what appear to be constantly shifting tripwires is ultimately not good for anyone. So here's a possible middle ground. Intentions matter, and insisting they don't creates a host of other problems. However, when personal relationships are at stake, and when interactions are going to be repeated, having noble intentions doesn't always absolve someone of responsibility. The person doing the offending has an obligation to consider how their comment might be perceived. Feelings matter, but always deferring to hurt feelings creates a climate where people have to be vigilant to an unreasonable degree. The person feeling offended has an obligation to consider the intent of the speaker and to give that person the benefit of the doubt. Here's where it's even trickier. Sometimes the offended person will have to be told that while their feelings are important, no promise can be made that they won't hear the offensive language again. Suppose someone at a workplace recruiting meeting says they feel the most qualified person should be hired for the job. The implication in their statement is that regard shouldn't be given to identity categories and should be merit-based only. And someone else who was at the meeting says they found that offensive because it denies the unique challenges faced by members of underrepresented groups. Now what? The person who made the comment can be made aware without being reprimanded of how what they said can be perceived. The person who felt offended can be told that they need to consider the intent of the person speaking without being told their concern is frivolous. But the offended person shouldn't be told that they will never hear reference to a meritocracy again. That then opens the door to the possibility of a separate conversation about how the person can react when that inevitably happens. Another reason that always deferring to feelings makes people feel they're walking on eggshells is that there will always be someone who is too sensitive, regardless of how too sensitive is defined or who's defining it. Suppose that After a workplace meeting, some participants express offense at the use of the word healthy. They feel that it's normative in a way that is narrow and exclusive to different body types. There is no reason to doubt the sincerity of their emotions. Is the solution to convince people to stop using the word healthy? Many people would feel that's going too far. The key, when the priority is maintaining tolerance for different viewpoints and welcoming dissenting voices, and when repeated interactions are likely, is to have a clear and explicit goal of the kind of environment an institution or organization wants to create. For instance, that could be a climate that is truly inclusive and open and where innovation can thrive. An explicit orientation can help clarify the path forward in what are often murky and sensitive situations.